By nightfall, the wind had changed. It carried a stillness that wasn't natural, like the air itself was bracing for something to break. I stood on the porch with my rifle cradled across my arms, scanning the hills for movement. Nothing yet. But I knew better than to trust quiet out here. Inside, Violet moved through the house, like she'd lived there all her life. She'd tied her hair back, stripped out of the crimson dress, and pulled on one of my late wife's flannel shirts. It hung loose on her frame, but the way she wore it, it didn't look borrowed. It looked claimed. "You got a cellar?" she asked. "No, but there's a tunnel. Starts beneath the floorboards in the pantry. My wife's idea. She always planned for the worst." Violet nodded, filing the information away without a word. She was focused, fast, sharp-eyed. Not a damsel. Not a fraud. More like a survivor who knew her time was borrowed and intended to make it cost someone. It was near midnight when the knock came. 3 times, steady, polite. Violet froze at the table, holding a lantern. "Lawmen don't knock polite at this hour," she whispered. I opened the door slowly, shotgun in hand. There stood 2 men in brown dusters, badges pinned to their coats. One held a piece of paper. "Mr. Crowe?" the taller one asked. "We're with the Territorial Authority. Looking for a woman. Goes by the name Violet McCall." "She's not here," I lied, grip tightening. The man didn't blink. "We've got reason to believe she is. Mind if we come in?" "I do mind." He sighed, folded the paper. "We can do this the hard way." That's when the second man reached for his holster, and everything happened at once. I fired. The first blast knocked him clean off the porch. Violet blew out the lantern. The house plunged into darkness. Bullets tore through the front windows as I ducked inside, dragging a table in front of the door. "They'll burn us out," Violet hissed, crawling across the floor. "Tunnel," I said. "Now." She grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward the pantry. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest. Floorboards lifted, revealing a narrow shaft barely wide enough for 2 people. We slid in and pulled the hatch shut just as boots thundered through the kitchen. For the next few seconds, we moved in silence, lit only by a stub of candle Violet managed to spark. I whispered, "What if they find the tunnel?" "They won't," she said, "but they will find that I'm gone, and they'll be mad." We crawled until the air grew cold and damp. The tunnel sloped downward, then back up. At the end, we emerged into the dark corner of the barn, behind a pile of old saddles and rope. I could still hear shouting from the house. Then the smell hit us. "Smoke. They lit it," I muttered. "Damn them to hell." Violet grabbed my hand. "We're not done." "Not if we can get to the safe." I stared at her. "How the hell do you know about the safe?" "Because Sarah Beth told me. And because you're not the only one who hid something under a barn floor." That's when I understood. She hadn't just come to protect me. She'd come for the truth, and now we were going to dig it up together before Morrison's men buried us with it. The wagon was late. Not by much, maybe a quarter hour, but long enough for me to pace the edge of my porch like a man waiting for a noose or a miracle. I didn't much believe in either anymore. The sun was bleeding out behind the hills, casting everything in rust and shadow. I held my hat in my hands, thumbs brushing over the brim like it might tell me something I didn't already know. Her name was Sarah Beth Collins. At least, that's what the letters said. Widowed, God-fearing, educated enough to teach children, humble enough to want a life out here. We'd written for 3 months. Nothing romantic, just practical. I needed a partner. Someone to cook, talk to, pray with. Someone to fill the hollowness that had set in after my wife and boy were taken by fever 2 winters back. I buried them both beneath the cottonwoods on the West Ridge. So when I saw the dust trail rising, I squared my shoulders. This was it. The second chance. But when the wagon finally rattled into view, everything in me went quiet, because the woman who stepped down wasn't Sarah Beth Collins. She wore a crimson dress so tight it made the wind blush. Her raven black hair was pinned up high, not for modesty, but to showcase the length of her throat. Painted lips, emerald eyes. She walked like she'd been born on a stage and dared the world to look away. And somehow, some godless, impossible how, she looked straight at me like she already knew my sins. I didn't speak right away. Couldn't. My tongue felt like rawhide. "You Tobias Crowe?" she asked, voice low and smoky as saloon firelight. I managed that. She smiled. Well, guess that makes me your bride. I stared at her. You're not Sarah Beth Collins. She held out a letter, folded, soft at the edges, my handwriting on the outside. No, but she set me in her place, said you were a good man, deserved to live. Then she dropped her gaze, just for a moment, said I had to come, or you'd die. What the hell kind of greeting was that? I took the letter, but my eyes never left her face. You're Violet McCall. Her chin lifted, proud, like she'd heard that name whispered in every brothel, alleyway, and backroom from here to Kansas City, because she probably had. I am. The driver was already pulling away. Didn't even wait for pay. I watched the wagon. Wheels vanish in the dust, heartbeat thudding. It was just me and her now. Violet McCall, the infamous woman in red. The scandal who'd been run out of 3 towns. The one who once testified against Judge Morrison's men in a case that vanished. From the papers overnight, I should have sent her packing. Should have slammed the door and locked it twice. But I did single quotes T-dot instead. I stepped aside. You can come in for the night, I said. Just one night, then we'll figure this out. She didn't thank me. Just walked past, trailing perfume and trouble. As the door shut behind us, I swear I felt the air change, like the past had followed her in, like a storm was just waiting to break. I didn't sleep that night. Not a damn wink. Violet McCall sat by the fireplace with a cup of tea she didn't drink, staring into the flames like they owed her something. Her dress clung to her even in stillness, but it wasn't the fabric that unsettled me. It was the calm, the kind of quiet that meant she'd lived through worse than any of us could name, and didn't scare easy anymore. I stayed in the kitchen, back against the wall, arms crossed, that letter unopened in my shirt. Pocket dot at some point I finally asked, why'd Sarah Beth send you? She didn't look up, because no one watches a whore. Not for long, not the right way, anyway. I should have been angry, confused, but I just waited. You ever hear of a man named Judge Elijah Morrison? She asked. That name hit like a boot, too. The ribs. Yeah, I said slowly. Used to run the circuit court up north. Took bribes. Buried good men on bad charges. Had a hand in my wife's case when she tried to fight the railroad. Violet's lips curled. Not a smile, more like a scar. He didn't just bury cases. He buried people. Sarah Beth worked in his house. I worked in his bed. We both escaped, barely. Thought we were free. Then, a week ago, Sarah Beth found out Morrison had eyes on you. Why? You came too close. Remember that land dispute 2 years back? The case you filed against the expansion? I nodded. He never forgot. The new survey maps? They prove half his empire sits on stolen soil. You didn't just threaten his money, you threatened him. I felt the air go out of me. My wife had died fighting that case. I'd buried the paperwork with her hidden, the rest in a locked safe beneath the barn. I thought the fight was over. Sarah Beth didn't want to risk you dying. Like your wife did, Violet said. So she sent me instead. She knew they'd come looking. And you just agreed. She finally met my eyes. She saved my life once. This was me paying it back. I leaned against the doorframe, heart pounding in my ears. You know things you shouldn't. About me, about my wife, my son. I held your boy once, she said quietly, before the fever took him. Sarah Beth had a photograph. Said your family deserved better than dying in silence. I swallowed hard. My throat felt thick. And now Morrison's men are coming? I asked. Violet nodded. They don't leave loose ends. I pulled the letter from my pocket. Opened it. It was written in Sarah Beth's delicate hand, smeared in spots. Like she'd cried while writing. Forgive me for what I've done, Tobias. I can't face the past. But Violet can. She's not what you expect, but she's the only one I trust to keep you alive. The truth is buried under your barn. Keep it safe. If you still believe in justice, fight. I read it twice. Then I burned it. Violet watched in silence. We need to prepare, I said. If they're coming, I want them to meet a man who's done losing things. For the first time, Violet smiled. It was small, sad, and somehow stronger than any gun I'd ever held. That night, I took the shotgun from above the mantel, laid it on the table, took stock of every round of ammunition I had left. It wasn't much. You any good with a pistol? I asked her. She reached into her bag and laid a nickel-plated derringer on the table. I never miss. The barn creaked like it was holding its breath. We crouched low behind a stack of hay, bales, while the firelight from the house flickered through the cracks in the wood. My home, what was left of it, crackled and groaned in the distant flames, licking through windows I'd built with my own hands. Violet didn't look back. Her focus was fixed on the loose plank at the far end of the barn floor. That's where it is, she whispered. Under there, I nodded, still listening for movement outside. We'll have to be fast. The safe was buried 3 feet under, behind a false wall of dirt and beams. My wife had helped me build it when we realized our land sat on something worth killing for, a boundary line. A legal oversight on the original railroad map that, if proven, could unravel Morrison's entire empire. The problem was someone else knew it now. We started pulling up the planks, every creak sounding like a gunshot in the dark. I handed Violet a pry bar, and she worked without hesitation, lips pressed into a thin line. How'd Sarah Beth know about the survey maps? I asked. Violet didn't stop working. Because they were Martha's. My heart stuttered. Martha, I repeated. My wife. She and Sarah Beth met years ago before Morrison had her blacklisted. Martha showed her the land records. Said if anything ever happened to her, someone had to make sure the truth didn't die too. I didn't know what hit harder, the fire still rising behind us, or the fact that my wife had been fighting a war I didn't even know was still raging. Then came the sound we dreaded. Boots. Outside the barn. 1 set. 2, maybe 3. Keep going, I told her. I'll stall them. You'll die, she snapped. Not if you find that safe and get what's inside. She hesitated, eyes fierce, then nodded. I grabbed my shotgun and moved toward the side door. Before I could open it, a voice called. Out. Tobias Crowe, the man barked. Deputy Will Crawford. I know you're in there. I opened the door slowly, gun raised. That right? Then where's your badge? Crawford stepped into the lantern light. His coat was torn, lip busted, and his gun hand shook. Behind him, no one moved. I'm alone, he said. Because Morrison sent men to kill me too. That gave me pause. Why? Because I asked questions. Too many. Found your name on the wrong list. Violet appeared behind me, holding a lockbox caked in dirt. We got it, she said. Crawford looked between us, then at the flames behind the hills. You don't understand what you found. We understand enough, I said. You? Here to help or finish the job? Crawford holstered his weapon. I want out, I want to live, and I want Morrison to burn. Violet stepped forward, calm as the eye of a storm. Then we ride, now, before daylight and death catch up to us. Crawford nodded once. We gathered what we could, papers, maps, the derringer, the cash my wife had hidden long ago, and vanished into the canyon. Behind us, the ranch collapsed. My old life turned to ash. But in front of us, justice waited ugly. Dangerous, long overdue, and maybe, just maybe, so did something worth living for. The trail Crawford led us through wasn't marked on any map. It carved between cliffs, so narrow, the moonlight barely touched our shoulders. We rode in silence, the only sounds the hooves crunching gravel and the soft rustle of papers tucked inside. Violet's coat. Those survey maps might have looked like lines and numbers to most men, but to Morrison, they were death warrants. By dawn, we reached a ridge overlooking the old mining road that led to Silverton, the nearest town, with the federal marshal's office. Crawford signaled for us to stop. We can't ride in together, he said, eyes still wary. I'm supposed to be dead. If Morrison hears I'm alive, he'll tighten the noose. Violet glanced at me. Then let's make sure he hears something else instead. We made camp just inside a grove of cottonwoods. Same trees I'd buried my family under back home. I sat with my back against one, staring into a weak fire while Violet spread out the maps. These cover 6 parcels of land, she murmured. All purchased under false names. All leading back to Morrison's people. He built his empire on theft. I nodded. And now we've got the proof. Crawford pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is a ledger I stole from Morrison's. Clerk. Lists every payment to judges, surveyors, deputies, even some journalists. Violet leaned forward, frowning. That name. Paul Wexler. He's still publishing for the Capital Tribune. Bought and paid for, Crawford muttered. The pieces were coming together too fast. Corruption, bribery, murder, but no one would believe us. Without leverage, and we were out of time. Suddenly, Violet stiffened. Riders, she whispered. 3 of them. Southridge. Crawford bolted up. They're sweeping for survivors. Survivors? I asked. They burned your house down, Crowe. Anyone who lived wasn't supposed to. That includes me. We grabbed the maps, doused the fire, and slipped through the tree line. I turned back just once, and saw the riders dismount where we'd been. One of them picked up our still warm ashes and swore loud enough for the wind to carry it. They'll keep coming, I said. Then we stopped running, Violet replied. We reached the outskirts of Silverton by nightfall and found a safe place, above a shuttered apothecary. From there, Crawford left with the ledger to find a contact in the marshal's office. I couldn't sleep again. Violet sat on the floor by the window, barefoot, her knees pulled to her chest. You all right? I asked. No, she said. But I will be. I sat beside her. We didn't speak for a long time. Then she said quietly, I used to think if I could just stay ahead of the fire, it wouldn't catch me. I looked at her. But fire always finds a way, she said. So maybe it's time we lit one back. The next morning, we handed the evidence to Federal Marshal Hayes. He didn't speak for 5 minutes. Then he looked at me and said, You ready to testify? I'll do more than that, I said. I'll make sure the whole damn territory. Here's it. Violet set her hand gently on mine. Her touch was warm, steady. We weren't fugitives anymore. We were witnesses, weapons, survivors. The courthouse in Silverton was little more than a whitewashed box with a tin roof. But that morning it felt like the center of the world. Marshal Hayes stood behind the desk with our documents spread before him like holy scripture. Crawford sat in the corner, pale and silent, his badge left on the table like a relic of another life. I stood beside Violet. She wore the same flannel shirt and a borrowed skirt from the apothecary widow. No makeup, no curled hair. Just Violet McCall as she was unvarnished and unafraid. You understand the risk, Hayes said. Once this gets out, Morrison will have people in every town. He's got judges, bankers, newspapermen. We've lived with the risk, Violet replied. Now we want the truth. She gave her testimony first. Her voice never cracked, but her hands trembled as she told them about Morrison's men, the stolen deeds, the bribes, the murders hidden under official seals. She spoke of the night Sarah Beth was taken. The night. She herself almost died, by the end of it. Even the stenographer looked sick, Then Crawford gave his statement, matching hers detail for detail. He handed over the ledger, swore on it, burned his bridges with every name inside. When it was my turn, I gave them the story of my land, my wife's fight, the maps she hid, the fire that took my ranch and nearly took my life, by the time I finished. Hayes leaned back in his chair like he'd aged 10 years. I'll wire the governor today, he said, and the U.S. attorney. If we move fast, we can have Morrison in irons before the week's out. What about everyone else? I asked. The ones who helped him? They'll fall, Hayes said. Might take time, but this is the beginning of the end. We stayed under guard for 3 days. Word started spreading like wildfire. Morrison's name vanished from saloons and courthouse walls. His allies started skipping town. And then came the wire. Judge Elijah Morrison arrested. Held without bail. Charges include fraud, racketeering, conspiracy, and attempted murder. I read it twice before handing it to Violet. She didn't smile. She just closed her eyes and let out a long breath. That night, she and I walked through the ruins of the ranch. The house was gone. Just blackened beams and broken memories. But the barn had survived. Violet stood beside me, barefoot in the soil, her skirt catching the wind. I thought I'd never stop running, she said. But I did. You're not alone now, I told her. She looked up at me, eyes glinting in the starlight. Neither are you. We made camp in the barn, surrounded by char and silence. But in the middle of all that ruin, we made a promise, to build again, to stay, to fight for something better. The fire had taken everything, but it had also cleared the way, and in its place something new was starting to grow. Spring came early the following year. The hills around the ranch were green again, tender, with new grass and promise. The barn still stood, patched and painted now, and beside it rose the frame of a new house smaller than the first, but ours. Built not from hired hands or debt, but by the sweat of my own back and the quiet strength of the woman beside me. Violet planted wildflowers in the windowsill boxes. Said they reminded her of her mother, though she never talked much about her past. I didn't press. We both had scars better left beneath the surface. Every day started the same coffee, chores, silence, and somehow that rhythm healed something. In both of us. The newspaper from Silverton printed a long piece about Morrison's downfall. Called it The Empire of Ash. Quoted my testimony, Crawford's too. They didn't name Violet. She preferred it that way. Her name had been printed enough in the wrong places. One evening, after setting fence posts, I found her by the edge of the cottonwood grove, hands in the soil, planting something I didn't recognize. What is it? I asked. Peonies, she said. They come back every year, even if winter tries to kill them. I sat beside her, watching her work. The sky was orange with dusk. The land was quiet in the way only healed wounds can be. You ever think about what comes next? I asked. She leaned back on her hands. I used to think I'd die in a back alley or vanish on a train no one remembered boarding. Now I think about dinners, about building a porch, about maybe getting a dog. I laughed. A dog? Something with muddy paws and no sense of personal space. Just to make it harder to keep pretending I'm not home. I reached for her hand, calloused and warm. She didn't flinch, didn't pull away. I thought I buried my heart with Martha and my boy, I told her. But then you walked off that wagon in a red dress and wrecked my whole plan. She looked at me, eyes soft and teasing. You're welcome. We kissed there beneath the cottonwoods. Not like the first time, desperate and searching, but like something permanent. Like two people who knew what it meant to lose everything, and choose to love anyway. Later, as we sat on the unfinished porch, the stars opened up above us, and I knew I wasn't just rebuilding a house. I was building a life, a new one, and she was part of it. Morrison died in prison 6 months later. No final words. No confession. Just a footnote in a story that once terrorized a whole territory. The empire he built crumbled fast after that. Judges resigned. Deputies vanished. Land deeds were re-examined. For the first time in years, people started believing that justice wasn't just a word politicians threw around. They sent me a letter from the Capitol offered to name a highway after my wife, Martha. I declined. Told them if they really wanted to honor her, fix the land laws so no more families had to bleed for the truth. They said they would. I didn't hold my breath, but a few months later, a clerk from the land office rode out and handed me a deed with a new seal on it. Notarized. Federal. Final. That patch of land, the one Martha fought for, the one Violet, and I rebuilt from ashes. It was finally ours. Violet cried when she saw it. Not loud, not messy. Just one hand over her mouth and tears rolling down cheeks that had learned how to stay dry through hell. She'd never had a place of her own. Now she did. We built slow, careful. A room at a time. The kitchen first, she insisted. Said the smell of biscuits in the morning was better than any sermon. Then the porch. And then a small nursery. Not because we had a child on the way, but because Hope asked for space. One afternoon, Crawford came by. Clean-shaven, sober. Said he'd started working with Hayes full-time. They were cleaning up more than just courtrooms now. Fixing what? They could. He looked at Violet and said, You did more than you know. She nodded once, and that was enough. In town, folks still stared sometimes. They remembered who she used to be or who they thought she was. But I watched those same folks stop by with eggs, tools, or newspaper clippings. They saw the new house, the garden, the woman planting peonies and laughing in the dirt. They saw the truth. Years passed. We raised goats. Adopted a boy who'd lost his parents in the mining collapse up north. Named him Jonah. Violet taught him how to shoot a pistol, but only after he could recite the 10 Commandments backwards. Every year, on the day the fire took my first home, we sat by the cottonwoods. We said nothing, just held hands. I used to think my life ended the day I buried Martha and my son, but I was wrong. It Ended the day I opened my door to Violet McCall, and it began again when I let her stay.